I have a couple of quick housekeeping things to do before I introduce you. So just give me a moment if you would. And for those of you joining us online, we will have a Q&A after Kim has told us her NDE and lots more. We will be opening it up to a Q&A. And so if you're joining us online and you would like to, maintain your privacy, because this is being recorded, you can do so by sending your questions through the chat. I'll pick those up. On the other hand, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask the question in real time, you can do so. But just know that you'll be seen here if your camera is open. Those of you who are here in person, I would encourage you, if you'd like to ask questions, there are some little Post-its and what have you over there, so please feel free to do so. But I would ask for everybody to just make their questions short and crisp, because it's a lot to juggle when you're trying to interview someone and read questions at the same time. So it's a bit of a right brain, left brain kind of exercise. So without further ado then, I would like to introduce our guest of honor, Kimberly Clark Sharp. I love Kimberly. We met back in 2023, not very long ago, at the IANDS conference when it was here outside Washington, D.C. But I have to say, Kim, I'd been hearing about you for years. So you have a great reputation and it does precede you. So it was just wonderful to put a name to a face and actually get to meet you. So Kimberly is going to be sharing her story, her experience, her near-death experience. She's also going to touch upon what's been one of my favorites as far as a piece of veridical evidence is concerned, and that is the finding of the shoe on the hospital roof for the lady who actually flatlined. And that when I heard that story 25 years ago, I tell you, that got my attention, because at that point I thought, this is not a hallucination. This is actually real, and it was verified. So I'd like you to touch on that if you would. Also, we need to blame you for all of this. You started this whole thing back in 1982. This was your brainchild. As a result of your experience, you felt that other people needed to have a safe place to come to. And so you formed the very first IANDS Group, and it's been going strong ever since. So you're the longest running group. I've been going for about 6.5 years, but you've been going for over 20 years, right?
I've been going for 43 years and 3 months.
I always miss that 10, between 2000 and 2010. That always drops out of memory for me, but you're right, 40-something years. Excellent. And you're also going to be telling us about invisibles, angels, and pets in the afterlife. And I'd like to ask you a couple of questions regarding your book and the work that you're doing. So we've got a lot to talk about. So without further ado, it's a great pleasure to introduce you, Kim. Take it away.
Thank you, Angie. So I will preface everything by telling you that I have no math skills at all, cannot add, subtract, multiply, or divide. I have no musical skills. Historically in church, I was asked to lip sync the hymns. It was bad. And I hated change. I hated change to the degree that I was planning to marry a boy I had known since the 7th grade, whose name was Robert Clark, and my maiden name is Clark. And that way, I wouldn't even have to change the monograms on the towels. I had things set. I was locked in. I was, in fact, engaged. Robert Clark had proposed. But that's the preface. Things did change. They changed when, 1970, May 25th, I was dead on the sidewalk. 2 failed resuscitations later. But I jump ahead of myself. Let me tell you about it. First, I have to share my dad's perspective. My father was with me. Without him, I would have nothing. Some medical records, that's all. But it was May 25th, state of Kansas, where I am from. I was in college at Kansas State University, living the Midwest dream, which is not big dreaming but I liked it because, again, I hated change. I also hated the fact that I didn't have a driver's license. I did, and then it expired, and I have it in college, and so came the time though I wanted a license, and by the way, I wanted a car. So went back home to Eastern Kansas, where I'm from, specifically Leawood, if you know the state. And my dad and I, on a beautiful Saturday morning, went to the Shawnee Mission Department of Motor Vehicles. And right there, I could insert a joke because doesn't everyone almost die at the DMV? I mean, this is common. So I remember feeling funny and telling my dad, so, wanted to sit down. And he said, there aren't any chairs. And that does it for Kim's memory. So I'm going to share what my father experienced, and then I'll jump in with what I was doing on a different level. So according to my dad, I signed all the papers correctly. Everything was fine, other than I had flunked parallel parking. So I did have to come back and finish that part, retake that part. And I have I told you my shortcomings, the math, no change, all that. Another short change was a severe lack of spatial dimensions. I mean, I flunked parallel parking because I was probably 2 to 6 feet away from the curb. It was bad. So my dad said we left, and as we were stepping out of the building, I completely collapsed. I fell into his arms, but dead weight, literally dead weight, is actually heavier than living weight. He could not support me. Down I went on the sidewalk. There happened to be a uniformed nurse passing by, and she hustled over and determined that I wasn't breathing and that I had no pulse. At that time, pre 911 calls, there were 2 phone calls made to help me. One to St. Luke's Medical Center in Kansas City, Missouri, the closest ER to my body, and the Shawnee Mission Department of Volunteer Firefighters, who arrived first. Again, according to my dad, they had new packaging, and they opened it up, and this was something I think it's called the Anderson portable ventilator. They slapped it on over my nose and mouth to seal an airway, and then turned on the machine to ventilate, because indeed I did not seem to be breathing. Sadly, because it was new packaging and they hadn't played with it yet or even been trained on it, as it turns out. It was on vacuum mode because it had 2 modes. Of course, we want air. That was good. But also, when people are choking, there's no airway possible. If this happens while eating, it's actually called a cafe coronary. It's why we tell our kids, don't run with candy in your mouth. That airway needs to be cleared. And the vacuum mode was to extract by air, strong air, any object blocking the airway to the lungs. I had no blockage. Mm. So when they flicked it on, it was on vacuum mode. I keep coming up with jokes. I don't normally do this, but I'm comfortable with y'all. They sucked the life out of me. I don't think I've ever said that in a talk. But yeah, that's what happened. And immediately apparent, according to my father, I mean, immediately, kind of blackish around here, my fingertips. They jumped on it, flicked the switch, pumped air in. But another problem with that is that our lungs are like sticky on the inside, they're damp. And when they come in contact with their own tissue, to separate that requires a steady intensive care unit situation where the air can slowly separate those lung tissues. I wasn't in an ICU. I didn't have that ability. My body didn't. My lungs had, in fact, collapsed, is what they say. The air, though, had to go somewhere, and it did. It went to my skin, and I inflated like a bad balloon. I mean, the visuals are incredible. And my poor father, oh my gosh, as a parent myself, can't imagine his emotional trauma, even though I did hear about it for years and years and years later. Anyway, clearly something was now very wrong, and the volunteer firefighters turned to my dad and said, "I'm so sorry. There's nothing more we can do." I'm actually married to a retired Seattle firefighter paramedic. In fact, he was in charge of our 911 program for 17 years. So I've picked up some knowledge along the way, which I'm sprinkling in. But you don't want to have that happen in the field as you're resuscitating someone. So also, medics can't say in any state, "Oh, she's dead" or "he's dead." There's euphemisms, like, "I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing more we can do." So then from the back of this apparent crowd, because I don't know, Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning in Kansas, I don't know, it attracted a crowd. "Edith, come on down to the DMV. There's a girl dead on the sidewalk." It was theater. Uh, so there was a crowd, and according to my father, from the back of this crowd came a man just pushing everyone aside with great authority. And he pushed the firefighters away, also with great authority. We have no idea who this was, but he started mouth to mouth resuscitation. Now, no longer necessary, by the way, just need a pump. To stay alive a little faster than that, you'll save whoever you love or you're in the presence of who is not breathing. I digress. He then was a swearing man. Our family joke was that he must have been from Missouri because people in Kansas don't swear, but he was swearing up a blue streak and not getting a thing. So he did turn to my dad, and in his euphemism said, "I'm not getting a blank, blank, blankety blank, blank thing." At that point, my dad's memory ends. He was now fully traumatized. He does remember, though, the ambulance arriving from St. Luke's and body thrown in the back. He jumped into the back too. Off we went. Apparently things went downhill a bit in the emergency room. According to my records, which, by the way, I pulled. I wrote a book called After the Light. I wanted to read my medical records. And I'm glad I did, because, oh my gosh, people, you can't chart like this anymore. Clutter happens in my house. That was it. um, so and where was I before the clutter? This is so fun being live.
We didn't quite hear what was going on in the
In
room.
the emergency room, I read my charts, and the admitting chart said, it was a question mark, simple faint, question mark, cardiac, question mark, cause of, not death, they used another word, another euphemism, but the cause of my needing to be resuscitated multiple times was a snafu with the ventilator. I thought, wow, death by snafu. That's a new one. So there I was, dead by snafu. Who cares? I didn't. My dad did. People observing did. The medics did. The Good Samaritan that my dad called this man who tried so hard to resuscitate me, always the Good Samaritan in our family. We bless him and his efforts. So here am I, though, and now we're going to get into why I'm with you today. So I heard a woman's voice to my left saying, "I'm not getting a pulse. I'm not getting a pulse." And in my perception, I don't remember seeing her, but I remember turning to the voice and saying, "Of course you're getting a pulse. Otherwise, I wouldn't be speaking." It seems so duh. But she ignored me. I tried some more to assure her I was okay. And then I realized, wow, I'm really okay. And then I decided to let go of everything. She was ignoring me. So what was this, like a near-death snit? I'm out of here. I was capable of that. I found myself in a completely different environment. I knew I was not alone. I was very comfortable. I was surrounded, though, by foggy material, and I could actually perceive what the foggy material was made of, like glints of brilliant light, less so, like I used to call them little bottomless pits, They're very dark with depth. But mixed all together, it was great and pleasant. And again, I knew I was not alone. It was the most comfortable feeling, y'all. Yeah, I felt like I was at the airport and I had my boarding pass and they just called my group. So I'm like in line to board. I'm expecting this. What I wasn't expecting is what happened next. And this is, by the way, after these many years, the hardest thing for me to describe because one problem with near-death experiences is basically they're called ineffable. There are no words. So these are my best shots at words. There was a light that exploded under me with such force. I cannot measure the power of it. It just was, if I had been standing on a planet, it'd be like the planet just exploded, except in the best way. This light was everything, was just everything to me. It came up under me, but then it just kept on going. I was in the midst of it. And my first words were, that I remember anyway, were homie home. Homie home is what I learned later from my parents. I used to say when we'd been away from our neighborhood and I was learning language, so maybe around 2. I don't remember this, but I was firstborn by a number of years. So I was, everything was so Gucci goo, Kimmy, so cute. So things got written down, but not to show me. But apparently, homie home is what I would say repeatedly when I saw that we were getting close to my house and toys and bedroom and all that. So homie home, homie home. Remarkably, that is clearly what I said in the presence of this light, which I lamely call God. Lamely, and I mean it. Talk about no words. There are no words. God is a commonly acceptable word with, we can all agree what God is in our own fashion and our own definition because that's what God is. But let me tell you, God is love. It was unbelievable. The love was, again, indescribable and directed at me. I thought, wow, I'm the most special person in the world. God loves me the most. That's ego. And I didn't think about it at the time, but I sure felt that later. So then the light, in addition to just enveloping me, I could also turn around in any direction. Mind you, my eyeballs are in Kansas. So what am I doing seeing anything? But I could see that there was a line, like linear line under me that went on basically forever. And I somehow understood I was beholding eternity itself. It was eternity. It just, and I never did see the beginning or the end of it. Also, though, the light was then layering endlessly on itself, and I mean endlessly. And somehow I knew, oh, those were dimensions. So we live in a third dimensional world. So I could get that, but oh my gosh, there were just again endless dimensions. And how was I even perceiving all this? Dimensions, linear, time, eternity. Not what I learned at Kansas State University at all, or any place. So I was very happy, to say the least. I got to ask questions and I got answers. So here we get into the miracle of the near-death experience. The communication was perfect between actually what I call my creator instead of God. Sometimes flow, F-L-O. I assign God a feminine gender when we're like in the flow. Thanks, flow, synchronicity. My creator comes the closest though, because I felt again, homie home. And if I refer to God in a gender, though there's no gender. It's spirit. It's creator. It's love. So I'll, ask questions like, what's going on? There would be that. No, I really didn't ask that. It's like, why are we born? That was a good one. And basically I was told, get in this perfect math and music, that we pretty much beat down the door for this life experience. It was our request as souls, as spirits, as the preborn. I didn't get that much information, but it was our choice. We were given it. And as about pain and suffering, what did I know about pain and suffering? I lived in a bubble. But I asked, and it was basically, it's just a fast track back to spirit, back to God, whatever. I thought that my questions were like amazingly mature. And God probably thought, what an idiot. But anyway, then I was told that I had to return. And that was a problem. I also learned that God lets us argue, and I did. I had a lot at stake. I did not want to leave this light, this love, this perfection, this learning, this reunion. Oh, the reunion. Oh my gosh, people, it's really good. So I said, no, I'm not going back. Again, the math and music stuff was like, no. God was, yes. And I was, no. Back it went. I mean, you can argue with God. It's just that on that level, God's going to win. On this level of 3D, we do have free will, but not so much there. So back I went. But here's the thing. I missed my human body by about 6 feet. In other words, the distance that I flunked parallel parking. I couldn't believe it. So my first thought after such a profound experience was, oh my gosh, I can't even park myself. And I could see myself through legs. I was on my back. I didn't fully recognize myself. But again, what was I doing with eyeballs in the body? But yet I was seeing. And then I saw a man I didn't recognize bend over and put his mouth against my body's mouth. There's some detachment. I'm not even identifying the body, my body. The moment his mouth touched mine, I went back into my body through him, and I knew a great deal about the guy. So I knew that he was actually scared, feeling rather incompetent, doing a lot of self-judgment, that he had jumped in spontaneously, and now what? And some guilt, but mainly he loved me. It was compassion that I felt from him. I just been with the greatest love of all. So of course, I'm going to go to it like a lighthouse. And I did. And then I was back in my body. And then it was hell. It was awful. It was terrible. It was like I was a wee thing running around in a dark, dank, horrible medieval castle with a lot of icky tapestries that I'd push aside. It was not comfortable. And I was really cold. I was feeling cold. And I wasn't afraid. It was just like, get me out of here. I mean, it's like, no, I'm not taking this. God in God's mercy showed up again. And I was shown to my right what would be my heaven. And again, the math and music stuff, like, basically, all right, already, if you really want to go, here you are. And it was beautiful. Like, it was like through a window or a portal, something like that. It was just beautiful. It was like a field or a meadow of green, kind of long grass waving, and off in the distance, see some white picket fencing, maybe some small shrubs or trees in the background. Really peaceful, really beautiful, not of earth. The grass was green, yes, and the sky was blue, yes, but not like earthly stuff. The intensity was off the charts. I mean, the grass wasn't green, it was green. The sky wasn't blue, it was blue. It's just super intense, very welcoming. Frankly, it looked like Kentucky, a calendar picture of Kentucky. And by the way, skeptics will often say, oh, people get what they expect in a near-death experience. Well, I still have never been to the state of Kentucky. I was not expecting Kentucky. Yet there it was. I was off. And then I was told, again, the math and music stuff, hold on. One more thing. And not true. There was more than one thing, but it caught my attention. There was a flash of light, And I saw myself and was told if I chose to live, that is where I would be living. And all I saw was where mountains met water. It wasn't Kansas, and Kansas is where I was going to be living, married to Bob Clark, so I wouldn't have to change the monograms on the towels. Thank you. No. So I declined, and off I went. And I was told, if you go through that, though, that's your border. I'm paraphrasing God now. Pardon me. But that was basically it. So, okay, big deal. I'm gone. And off I again started to go through. And then there was another flash of light. And it was a gallery. It's like a picture gallery of like images, this side are framed. And there were captions under each one in English. I could read. And it was like best friend, next door neighbor, colleague. It went on like that. And I was told that if I chose to live, those people would play a significant part in my life. Who cared? They were strangers. I got Kentucky over here and I'm out. I felt like I was so close to going through when there was a third flash. Boom. It was an image of me being of service. I said, cool. I did not mean that as a decision. I meant it as an adjective. God took it as affirmative action, and back I was. I was like, what? So when you die and you meet God, if you say cool, you might be set back. Just a little hint in advance. So now I'm back. Ambulance ride. I hate to give away the end of a good book, but she lived. But I did live. And into a world I didn't know any longer. Actually, one of my analogies to this was like my life was a perfectly set jigsaw puzzle, everything in place. And then along came a near-death experience, and all the pieces went in the air, and they fell down every place that I didn't know where anything went anymore. Nothing fit. Nothing fit. I felt, talk about suffocation. I had to get out. So I did recover. I did get a car, a Volkswagen Squareback, and into the car went yours truly. And I had a hamster named Toto. I kept in a bird cage. So Toto was in the front seat, and off we went. We went for, I didn't know where mountains met water. I had no clue. And I got to say, my mother did not. My dad had all the trauma when I died. My mom's trauma was when I'm leaving her. I mean, no one left my mother. That didn't happen. I swear she was a speed bump on the driveway, the poor thing. But relatives said, no, she'll be back in 6 weeks. Just let her have her way. Well, that was again 1970, and the poor woman finally died in 2018, well into her 90s, still waiting for me to come back. But understood my choice. So now I'm on the road in a car, by the way, with 4 speeds, and I don't know how to drive. Poor Toto just rolled up at a ball and said, I want a near-death experience too, but I'm not coming back. So off we are doing, lurching, really with no game plan in mind, but the mountains were to the west, more to the east from the middle of the country. So I thought, okay, I'll go west. On approach to a paid toll booth station, about which there were warnings for miles, the weight of my decision was upon me. I got really frightened. I was leaving everything I knew because of a thing, because, oh, cool. I mean, I only had fragments of stuff that didn't make sense. It was very confusing, yet I was driven by something. And that was true, actually. I was driven by something. But I was scared, and I began to cry. And not the sweet little, teary cry you see on soap operas. It was like what's called the Oprah cry, where there's mucus involved and your teeth it was bad. I was crying very hard, and I started to say, I don't want to do this. I hate change. I'm not going to change. I'm not doing it. I mean, obviously, I'm not doing this. I hate change. I hate change. I hate change. Then I learned what a funny thing creator is. Because in my now loud protestations about I hate change, came the toll booth. And there was a big sign that said, change needed. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, but I got it. It was like, on here, I'll blow. And then I said, well, I could use a Kleenex then. And I know my mom had to put this object in the car. She had to have, she would have. But nonetheless, I needed a Kleenex. I hadn't noticed before. I looked down between the seats, and there was a white box with black lettering that said Kimberly Clark. That was my name. Kimberly Clark made Kleenex, among other things. And so I got the Kleenex and like, oh, okay, good one. And off we went. Many adventures later. I will add in summation about the world's most amazing road trip was that I'm out of Kansas. I was with Toto. Outside of Hays, Kansas, we had a tornado, not a big one, but enough to, make me want to like not keep driving. And then I wound up ultimately in Seattle, Washington, which then, as now, is called the Emerald City. So I really am Dorothy. If Dorothy, though, didn't go back to Kansas and decided to stay in the Emerald City, that was me. So this kind of stuff, you can't make up. I just love noticing things now because after a near-death experience, I began to notice things like who is driving the car. It was amazing, but every step of the way, I thought, oh, Denver, this is where mountains meet. Well, not water, but it's got to be a lake somewhere. Wonderful adventures in Denver, not it. Up to Berthoud Pass in Colorado, where my brother was living. Mountains, water in terms of source water from a mountain stream, but nah, that wasn't it either. Down the hill I went. I wasn't alone by now. That tornado took me into a college friend's hometown. I spent the night with her. She packed a bag and left with me. So many of the things that I write about and share were witnessed. Thank goodness. Anyway, and on it went. Got to Lake Tahoe. Oh, for sure. This is where mountains melt water. We're done. This is it. And I settled in for a bit, but I knew a fellow from college that was working in the Sahara there, and he was the lighting guy for the current show, which was the Righteous Brothers. And I sat with Bill Medley in the darkened audience while the light checks were going on. And he said, do you want to get an ice cream cone? There's this place new in town. It's got 33 flavors of ice cream. Oh, okay. And I did in peace tell others in little bits of how crazy life was. But he said, no, it's not here. And he was right. I moved on, wound up ultimately. Oh, and then Salt Lake City. That was another one. Oh, it's got to be it. And I had an aunt that lived there. The sofa behind me is named after her, Aunt Sophie, because you sit on that sofa, it just envelops you like her lap did. So that's my Aunt Sophie behind us. Made it to San Francisco. I was a hippie by then. I found a community. I found people who got me. And it was like peace, love. And I actually lived for a while on Haight Street itself, going, gosh, it's so ironic. I live on hate, yet I'm so full of love. Just like, yeah, I'll take another joint. And I make no apologies for that. I've gotten through life without doing any chemicals, but I figured if Mother Nature grew it, it's safe for me. That was my thing. So yeah, marijuana, it was okay. But then things fell apart there. Altamont, things had happened that the scene changed. So I drove north. I hit Seattle. The moment I crossed the city limits, I knew this was it. There was no question. Yet another sign from God, like, ha, ha, ha. Big sign, now famous. The Boeing crash had happened. The entire economy of Seattle at that time was built on Boeing. And there's a big sign that said, Will the last person leaving Seattle please turn out the lights? And I'm bopping into town like, that's okay. I'm on a mission from God. I got my hamster. I have my destiny. And I did. Everything fell into place after that. So I will also share that I've never applied for a job or graduate school. I've never applied for a job ever. Yet I've had an outstanding career. So I was always in the right place at the right time. Another metaphor, but it's like my life has been like standing on the automatic door opener of the grocery store. You know, the door's open, but with it is a lot of work. You got to stock the shelves, you got to organize things, you got to greet the customer. You know, there's work inside. I've worked hard in my life. I became a social worker, and I am still a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Washington. Again, I was asked to apply to graduate school. I never paid a dime in tuition in 2 years. I was just, and remain so. I'm so guided. It's crazy. But where I wound up in an internship was at Harborview Medical Center, which remains the trauma center that serves 1/4 of the landmass of the United States. This is top tier trauma center on steroids. And there I was, this internship, which had been handed to me. I had already written my thesis on child development and child abuse and all that. And so, you know, again, my chart is done. I'm good. And then suddenly, oh, they can't place me in where they were going to, but we're going to put you in Harborview on intensive care and coronary care. And I'm like, huh? I don't know anything about grown-ups, and I don't know anything about death and dying. Wink, wink, because I did. I I I built immediately a really good reputation because I wasn't afraid of death. That was one of the byproducts, as it turns out, of my near-death experience. And it's not uncommon, by the way. In fact, it's one of the questions I would ask. You know, so are you afraid of death? Nah. That's how it was. So with that confidence, I became a great comfort. Plus, I had a big edge, the invisibilities. I could see things that other people couldn't. And there was a whole passel of stuff to see. Oh my gosh, it's crowded. We just can't see it, but it's crowded, people. So, for example, of course, I didn't share anything. Let me back up a bit. I wasn't going to tell a soul about what happened to me. Are you kidding me? I had to go through the emergency room to get to my office at Harborview, through the emergency room. So, you know, it was my routine. I'd leave that way too. Knew everybody. I was walking in one day and there was a woman who looked a lot like me, age-wise, appearance-wise, who was on a gurney in 2-point restraints, which are the wrists, looking miserable. And I just kind of offhand said, she was her thing, you know, 'cause she looked healthy. And the resident said, oh, we're sending her up to 5 Center, which is lockup psychiatric care, because she says she feels like she's been going in and out of her body. I was like, oh, really? Mm, I was too. And I was the social worker. I, it was a lesson. It's like, do not share this ever in your lifetime, Miss Kim, ever. So with that in mind, I kept a lot of stuff, well, everything to myself at work, not at home, but at work. So one example of this that I treasure, actually, it was my job to go out to, I did many things, but I was like the go-between between the family or loved ones in the waiting room and the patient and the doctors and nurses in intensive care, coronary care. Well, a woman died in intensive care. Her next of kin was her 16-year-old son who had no one else, no other relative. And the doctor and I had to go out and inform him that his mother had died. And it was, parts of my job weren't great, but I could be a great comfort. I asked if he wanted to see his mom again. He said no, but he wanted to talk to her. Well, there are curtains that go around the beds in the intensive care unit. So I said, no problem. So in case he changed his mind, the nurses cleaned her body up and they drew the curtain. Then I went out to get him and we walked up to the curtain outside of where her body was. I knew where her head was. And I said, her head is there. She can hear you. I promise she can hear you. Tell her anything you want. Ask her for anything you want. She is there with you. Well, I knew that because I saw her and she was standing next to him with her arm around him as he was talking to her physical body, but she was not in the body at all. She was there providing maternal comfort to her only child. I love this stuff. I love that such things happen. I can't explain them. I don't know why I can see stuff, but it's very, very comforting until it's mind blowing. And mind blowing happened. So now I have a really good reputation as a social worker. And yeah, feeling good about myself. But bored because Harborview is also with University of Washington. So it's a teaching hospital. And to get ahead academically required research. I wanted to get ahead academically. I loved it. But I was bored by any research project, the effect on men, post-cardiac, boring, boring, boring. I needed a gig. A gig happened. One night, a woman named Maria, Spanish speaking, from Yakima, Washington, 100 miles to the east over the Cascade Mountains, was in Seattle, collapsed, needed resuscitation, and was admitted to Harborview by Medic One post resuscitation, but unconscious. The next day, it was my job to do workups, and Maria needed a lot of workup. My workup of social, psychological, and emotional evaluations, but also she needed money. We needed to find her family. And I did not speak Spanish except for high school level, but no problem. There was a translator there. So, worked through that. Nice lady, Maria. Fine. Went about my business. About 3 days later, while I was sitting on the coronary care unit where she was hospitalized, and as opposed to the mom behind the curtain in coronary care at Harborview, they are actually large rooms where the doors can shut, even though it's part of the same situation. I was charting. All of a sudden, me, flatline. Happens all day, every day at Harborview. Not a big deal. But this was Maria flatlining. And I was like, Well, again, a teaching hospital means you don't get a doctor, a nurse, and a respiratory therapist. You get the thundering herds. You get, the doctor, the attending doctor, the interns, the visiting doctors, the residents, the nurses, the student nurses, the observing nurses. Same with respiratory therapy, the students, the interns, and it's packed. There are about a dozen people in her room. Well documented resuscitation. And then she was successfully resuscitated. Code call was off. Room was going to be cleaned up. Maria was unconscious, but she was in what's called normal sinus rhythm. And I went about my day. Later on, I got a call from Maria's nurse saying, "Can you come up here? We can't find the translator. Maria's really agitated. We're afraid she's going to flip back into cardiac arrest." I was like, okay. So back I went. Maria indeed was agitated, and indeed I could not find the translator anywhere. So we had to just make it work, and we did. So I'm going to encapsulate this conversation because this isn't how it happened. But in summation, Maria first told me that she could see everything that was going on in the room up by a corner. She pointed to La, and she did her best to tell me, who was there that she knew, the equipment. And I discounted it entirely. She was actually speaking to the best and the worst person possible. Because if I thought I was a schizophrenic waiting for 2-point restraints in the ER to go up to lockup psych, that meant she had to be crazy because she's beginning to talk about crazy things, out of body stuff. And I knew she wasn't crazy. I did her mental health workup myself. But I still discounted it because I hadn't made peace with my own experience or even sense of it. And I thought, well, she was educated. Should she go into cardiac arrest by the nurses? And yeah, whatever. Then she said, just like that, she found herself outside of her room looking down on the emergency room entrance and driveway, which she described in her memory as being one way, automatic doors opening. Again, it's like, yeah. Lady, your room is above that door. And it was. But I was so wrong. Who would come and unplug a critically ill woman? I was trying to think maybe housekeeping shoved her bed by the window. But that required, I don't know, killing her. I mean, you don't unplug someone. It just doesn't happen. I was really scrambling for reasons to explain why she could accurately describe the situation. Not to mention, there's a flat roof. You can't see the driveway and the entrance from her window. All ER entrances have a roof because you don't want your patient to get wet. So then she said, and this was the reason she was agitated. She wasn't agitated like grumpy. She was agitated, thrilled. She said, again, just like that, she found something on a ledge. It was a tennis shoe, grande, um, dark blue, a little scuff by the small toe area, a white shoelace coming out that was going under the heel. These micro details, and I'm thinking, what, in case there's other shoes out there that I have to, okay, this one doesn't have a lace under the heel. What is a shoe doing on a ledge anyway? But again, I was a good social worker, so out I went, walked as much as I could around the building. That was not working. I saw a bird land on a ledge and I couldn't see the bird, so I thought, I got to go in. She wasn't sure where she was. She had no orientation, but she thought she was 3 or 4 stories above the ground. Great. Luck o' the Kim. I started out on the 3rd floor, but on the opposite side of the building of where she had been. I hadn't asked for directions. I don't think she could have given them to me. Fortunately, the people on 3rd floor were my own patients. This is where people went after coronary care events. So I wasn't interrupting anybody. If there was a patient in the room, it was someone I knew and was following. So it's like, excuse me, just want to peek out here. In some rooms, I could see from the hallway because the windows went down almost to the floor that there was nothing out there. Around I went. I got into a room where there was, I'm not sure if there was a cart blocking part of it. Honestly, right now in this moment anyway, I don't remember. Whatever. I walked to the window and I looked down, and there was a large dark blue tennis shoe. It had a white shoelace coming out under the heel. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Even in the memory, my chest is thumping because what? And I had a flash of scrambling to find a skeptical response. Oh, Maria was a bird. Well, that didn't work, or oh, there's a building half a mile away where she would not have had access to, but if she had gotten on the top floor with binoculars and a telescope, she would look. I couldn't make sense of it in the microseconds I had to then lose control of standing. I now know what it's like to almost pass out. I felt like a flour sack had hit me behind the knees, and I bonked my head on the glass. And out loud, I said, "This happened to me." And I remember my breath momentarily hitting the glass. And it was my watershed moment. Done on many levels. I reached out and got the shoe. I couldn't see the scuffed up edges because I was not outside. It was phenomenal. I mean, And it raises the question again, how can we see without eyeballs? I mean, how does that work? I do not know, but it worked for me. And now Maria is citing things that I am finding. And again, I am the social worker. I am the professional, and I got this shoe. So then I became a mean social worker. I went back down to Maria's room, put the shoe by my back, and said, "Do you remember like the inside of the shoe, what it looked like?" Because that was my perspective. And she said, "No, no." And then I pulled the shoe out. Viva Zapata. My
Mhm.
Spanish came back. And that shoe became the Shroud of Turin of Harborview Medical Center. You're going to feel like I'm lying with this next question, but I swear it's the truth. But back then, which was, 77 or 78, when patients were admitted to the hospital, they actually stayed until they were healthy enough to be discharged. I know that sounds like a fantasy, but that used to be the case. And Maria was there for 3 weeks, and that shoe sat there. And it was the nursing staff that spread the word, not Maria or me. We had our check marks done. I could validate her, and she could validate me. And by the way, I followed her outpatient like I do my other patients at Harborview. I followed her for 3 years. This was not a flash in the pan kind of relationship. It was a relationship. But then it was 1980, and I went backpacking around Europe for months. One of my graduate students took my caseload. When I came back, Maria had disappeared. Never found her. I have no idea what happened to her. Um, but the gift she left for the field of what we now call near death experiences was obviously huge. This predates Raymond Moody, who wrote Life After Life and coined the phrase near death experiences. None of that had reached my attention. Although he had written the book, but again, had not reached my attention. So, but I reached Raymond Moody's attention because that little shoe was being talked about. Like now he would say it had gone viral, but it was going viral just by word of mouth. And it went fast. And because I had credentials and um, I hadn't shared with anyone at that time that I'd had a near-death experience, but I was a credible healthcare professional who could validate, and so could everyone else. Again, there were probably a dozen people in her room during her resuscitation. She was inpatient for 3 weeks. On and on and on. Everyone knew about the shoe, and then it spread to other hospitals and all that. But again, I wasn't going to share my own near death experience or anything about the shoe outside of my little world of intensive care and coronary care. But, God had different plans, to be honest. This is the flow thing. That's why I assigned the flow gender because I was on a live TV show in the afternoon, super popular, made more popular by the Seattle Sonics, who just won the championships. They were also going to be on. So viewership was very high. There were not enough seats in the studio, standing room only. All these fans were there. And then in the back room were my nurses from intensive care and coronary care who were there to give me drugs. I was so nervous.
Mhm.
No, but they were there to cheer me on. Turns out the Seahawks didn't show up. They were on the golf course. There were no shows. I had the entire show to myself with a huge audience being introduced as the death and dying social worker, because that was my reputation by then. Again, I was very good at what I did, cheating, but nonetheless, I was good. So during a commercial break, one of the nurses, the head nurse of the coronary care, uh, shouted out, "Tell them about the shoe on a ledge." Well, they were looking to fill airtime with anything, but it was me that had to fill it. So when I came back, first question was, "Oh, what's this about a shoe on a ledge?" And that's when it really got out, that story, because now it's being broadcast. And then on it went. The people that I saw in that gallery became important people in my life. Oh my gosh, starting with the first one. The first one said best friend. Thanks God, I got I got a best friend from HE double toothpicks. And we actually have a podcast that's about to come out called the Telepathy Tapes, where we were both interviewed on this subject for the first time in public. And she was a pistol. And, and I was the opposite of what she wanted in a friend. But time went on. PMH Atwater has assessed many years ago that it takes an average of 7 years to process a near-death experience. That's been true in my clinical observations. This was about 7 years in when I had a date and he sold sailboats and he had a new customer he'd sold a boat to, but she wanted to see him. But we were on a date, so will you come with me, Jim? I sure will. All right, we go to this customer and I leaned over and looked down into the boat, and there she was, the woman I saw in the gallery that said best friend. That was as shocking as finding the shoe, by the way. It was a shock. I mean, and it hadn't happened until then. And all I could do was go, "You're my best friend." Well, she was on this side of a sociopath herself. I mean, she was not having it. She's a porcupine to hug. I say this in front of her, and she will like agree. Absolutely, Kim. And Kim was the most annoying, obnoxious person I ever met because I was going, but you're my best friend. But you're my best friend. I mean, I wore her down. It was just, can you imagine how annoying, again, being around someone, hi, you're my best friend. Near-death experiences can be socially inappropriate. Often, in my experience, we get a little enthusiastic and, oh, she wanted me as a best friend as much as she wanted her boat to sink. I mean, it was like, oh, and her perspective is funny. If she's talking about how I'm just minding my own business. I want, just bought this boat. Here's this woman, this blonde, leaning over, going, "You're my best friend." I was like, "You freak!" I mean, it was just weird. That's how we became best friends. But I did wear her down, and she will talk about that. I wore her down. She is still my best friend. This is now almost 50 years later. We are still tangling and we are still BFFs. I just spoke with her last night. I always speak with her a lot. I have other BFFs, but she was a biggie. And indeed, what we bring into each other's lives in balance is phenomenal. But on it went. I mean, next door neighbor, yeah, Alice Jones, significant person. So life was okay at that time. But the invisibilities. Are you still hanging with me, by the way? I've been
Please, yeah, absolutely. We're right here. Keep going. Keep going.
okay.
About the invisibilities, those are intriguing. The angels and the pets in the afterlife, etc.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a sip of water if you don't mind. Okay. What anyone would call weird stuff was happening. I came back, to the best of my knowledge, with only one gift, but it's a doozy. It's the gift of discernment. Another reason why I remain a really good social worker, I can read people. I mean, not like a psychic. I just can read them. It's just there. So, if someone's in pain or scared, whatever, in a medical setting where they might die, it was good for me to know I could go right in there. I didn't have to tiptoe around. You're terrified. I understand. And they were. And then I could, without revealing my own near-death experience, could assure them with great authority not to be afraid. Um, but again, those invisibilities. So I'm going to just randomly tell you some stories. I have no order of events in what I'm going to share from here on, except to add that my career continued. I worked at Harborview for a long time. I retired as a clinical associate professor in the School of Social Work, but my mail now comes to Professor Kimberly Clark Sharp. So somehow I got a raise on paper. So I love looking at my ego is, by the way, firmly in place, people. I'm not one of those, I let go of my ego. Nah, I need my ego. It helps me set boundaries. It helps me know my zip code, recognize my family. I mean, I like my ego until it gets checked. So, um, I have so many stories. I might take notes because now here's another thing that happens when I get into this groove is that I begin to hear things. Tell my story, tell my story. So I'm taking note. I'm now, this is wonderfully weird. I'm a secretary here, so
So are you a medium in this case? Are you hearing from the other side and they're saying, "Nope, tell my story. Nope, nope."
yes, absolutely, yes. Oh my gosh, there's this guy named Tom Sawyer. Oh, I mean, deceased. Amazing near-death experience. Or I can do a lecture on him. Last November at a Seattle IANDS meeting, I'm in the women's bathroom. He shows up in the stall. He's dead. It's like, tell my story. It's like, oh, really? But he was very polite about it. And I then went out and closed the meeting with his story. Stuff like that happens. So it's not like I'm totally distracted all the time, but in this current state, I am indeed. So, and Chuck Griswold, this is interesting. This is a first, dear listeners and viewers. I've never done this before. I think it's because I'm maybe tired or comfortable at home or really like everybody I'm talking to right now. I do feel very comfortable. I'm grateful for that.
Wonderful.
So, Betty Preston, I just got a heart.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. It means everything to me. Um, Betty Preston, I met when I met someone else that I saw on the wall. Betty Preston lived in Seattle and she was a near-death experiencer who had written up her story, also did as her byproduct of an NDE automatic writing. And now she had gathered, enough of a group of people wanting to learn automatic writing to reserve a room in Pioneer Square district of Seattle. I, at that time, had become part of something called Spiritual Emergencies Network, and that was working for me. And I was about to hold my first meeting of Spiritual Emergencies Network in a rented room in Pioneer Square, and it was the same room as Betty Preston. Again, flow. We figured out we should just combine groups. We both had near-death experiences, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, oh, and then there's this researcher coming to town from the University of Connecticut named Kenneth Ring. And I really want you to meet him. Well, it turns out he really wanted to meet me too. He had heard about the shoe, but wasn't sure how to make that connection. It was through Betty Preston. So Betty's near-death experience is an example. I have many examples of pets, not just, well, she would correct me. If I say pets in the tunnel, she'd go, no, no, no. Animals loved by people is what Betty saw. Betty had been in the University of Washington Medical Center surgical cardiac with her chest laid open in very dangerous cardiac surgery. And then the worst happened. The air, I could relate to this. The air in her case didn't fill her body like it did mine on the sidewalk. It filled her heart. Her actual cardiac chamber was expanding. And the surgeon, who I have met, well, back then I met and talked to myself, said he had two choices: let Betty's heart go kablooey in pieces all over the OR, or he would take his scalpel and stab her in the heart. And that's what he did. He took his scalpel. He knew where to stab. Stabbed her in the heart, let the air out. Pretty dramatic way to have a near-death experience. I would say Betty Preston was dead. Surgeon would agree. Massive resuscitation efforts. She lived. But what she was doing during all that drama was going through a tunnel. But it was a tunnel that I would say was filled with pets. And then she would say, no, not pets, animals loved by people. And that's a lot of animals. So there were horses and doggies and kitties and birdies. And I'm terrified to think I might wind up in that tunnel and all the spiders that I have killed with impunity the goldfish I let die as a kid will be like waiting for me, but probably not. The love was there. But in Betty's mind, she was funny. She said, "Oh, wrong tunnel." Not what she's expecting anyway. And by the way, she had no pet background. She wasn't a pet person. She became that though. Her property, her long suffering husband, they had so many dogs and cats and birds after that was silly. But she's the person who, with me, co founded Seattle IANDS. And Ken Ring did come to town. And the whole idea of groups sprung forth, the support group of which you are a part, an IANDS support group, all that was birthed on a bar stool with Kenneth Ring because we were waiting for dinner in a Red Robin and we were sitting in the bar. And he was talking about how his wife was going to divorce him if one more near-death experiencer knocked on the door of their home. There was no resources for NDEers at that time, so they were flocking to the people who were doing research and had decided, oh, we're going to do let's see, an organization, and we'll call it the International Association for Near-Death Studies. That was just 5 guys. There was no one else involved when they started the International Association. So, but word got out, into ears were kicking down Ken Ring's door. And that's when the idea of, groups came up. And he was, yeah. And so it was, Ken had the idea, I had the idea, Betty was on board, and we started Seattle IANDS in June of 1982. I haven't missed many meetings since then. And we meet every month in person. And it just took off. But 4 women met first in Betty Preston's living room. So if one thinks, oh, I can't start a group, like, yeah, you can. We were just, 4 chicks sitting around talking. We all had near-death experiences. You've heard a bit about Betty Preston's experience. You've heard my experience. There's Joan Berriman with burn scars up to here. She was a scientist by trade who had a near-death experience that blew everything out of the water. She had been an atheist, and that had changed her, so she wanted to talk about that. And then there was Carolyn Graves, who was Indigenous Alaska woman who had a near-death experience during childbirth when things went really bad, and she had found herself walking along a deep forested pathway, well beaten down but dirt, deep, deep woods, and she got to a chasm that was impossibly deep, but not that wide. And on the other side of the chasm were all of her ancestors, natives. And in the center was her sister who had died already, holding the baby that Carolyn was just given to know she had birthed and who had died. Mm-hmm. That baby was now in deceased sister's arms. And you would think that Carolyn would be so happy and relieved, but she was not, because they were all saying, go back, like, go back, the whole line of them. And there were a lot of ancestors, and they were in one voice, go back. And she didn't want to. That was her baby. I mean, anyone who's been a mom knows that primal need. But go back she did. And that was the 4 of us. And then we met again. We didn't tell anybody, but 25 people showed up. It's like, how did they hear about this? And it just rolled on. And we decided to call ourselves the Seattle International Association for Near-Death Studies. And by golly, now we have a website, which is seattleiands.org. We have a YouTube channel. Ooh, very creative. Our videographer is a retired CBS journalist and videographer out of Los Angeles, and he likes to mess around. So he films every indie ear unless the mic goes bad or something happens, and they wind up on our YouTube channel. But he knuckles them down to just sound bites, just 10 to 20 minutes with title cards and music. And a couple of them, the near-death experiencer is talking about what led to their NDE, and then they start talking about everything goes into color. They're really cute. And they're bite-sized. You don't have to devote an hour and a half or so like you are to me. So I wanted to share that. We have a snail mail newsletter that has been going on for decades. And all this organization, and we're a nonprofit, organization and a proper charity in Washington State, all because 4 women ran into Ken Ring and started what now is what we do. We meet as near-death experiencers, as people who have been spiritually transformed in some way by an event. The other people that attend are people who are grieving, people who don't know why they're there, but they're drawn to it. You know the drill. You're sitting in a group right now. So that's been a great blessing. But that was the first time I heard about animals in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
I have another story. I have 3 subsets. I did have to do research. I mean, and it had to be published, peer-reviewed academic journals. If University of Washington, was accepting no less than that. So my 3 subset specialties were children, frightening experiences, and suicide attempts. It's through that last, the suicide attempt one, that I met Dr. Bruce Grayson at a suicidology conference in Dallas, Texas. Within less than a year than meeting Ken Ring. Everything was just coming together. But anyway, I began to talk to children. Melvin Morse did a study which led to a best-selling book called Closer to the Light. I was part of that study. It was 1 year at our children's hospital in Seattle. My background was in child development, so I knew the names of a lot of crayon colors, so I had an edge. And I knew some songs and some stories that worked. So there was a child that had, and if that's my phone and it's on silent, that's weird because it's not, if you're a ding, I'm not doing it. It's getting weirder in my office right now, people, as I tell about these things. Like ding, ding. Okay, I'll tell your story. Don't be so graphic. Anyway, a little boy in, I believe, Wyoming, 3 years old, who drowned in a creek, came to my attention, well, because it was all over the news. Local news first, a picture of the sheriff lifting his dead body out of the water. Dead. But he began to talk about what I'm about to tell you, and it came to the attention of Stone Phillips. It actually wound up on a national broadcast. And here's what the kid said. By the way, this was, even at 3, pretty grounded child. He lacked everything but a piece of wheat sticking out of his mouth as he told the story. He said that, yeah, he died, but he didn't use those words. But yeah, when I died, he had 2 pets that were favored by him, 1 dog and 1 cat. The routine is when they get out of the family truck, first the dog would come along, or paws on this little boy's shoulders and knock him down. Not a big dog, obviously, but knock him down. Kid would get up, and then along would come the cat, who's going to compete with the dog and climb up his jeans to hear, and then look at the dog and go, wow. And it was a great family story. That's what these pets did around this child. Now he's dead. Oh, and so are the pets, by the way. So he finds himself in this beautiful location. He feels really good, really happy. And there's his dog coming up, who hits him on the shoulders and knocks him flat. Along comes the cat. The cat climbs up, just like business as usual. That was his greeting committee for his pets. And but if you think about it, children don't know a lot of dead people. Even grandparents are usually alive at that age. So, but a dead pet, not uncommon. A loving pet or 2 in the form of a cat and a dog are important greeters to a child. It works. Then I'm off my notes. Sorry, everyone who's.
Are you going through your 3 different categories?
No, I'm being spontaneous right now.
Well, you also talked about frightening experience and suicide attempts.
I can address that, but
you talked about Tom Sawyer. You talked about Chuck Griswold.
All right, I will. I'll speak quicker because I do have one more story about a child and animals
Okay.
that are not pets, and many aren't. But one child that was at Seattle IANDS, brought in by his mom, tragedy. They were on a mountain pass, Stevens Pass. If you're familiar with the area, there's a part of Stevens Pass which is an abyss. Uh, Dad lost control of the car with himself behind the wheel, mom in passenger side, an infant, and our little hero who was 4. Car went over the cliff. Dad dead immediately. Mom thrown from the car and survived incredibly. Baby thrown from the car, sitting on the like a cliff edge, not high, but perfectly fine in a car seat. And then this little boy who drowned, and he was underwater for 40 minutes, but it was ice water, and that's called the diving reflex. And we've all got it, but in spades if you're a child. But he survived, go figure. But he came to the meeting wanting to share his story. Well, I know from the children's hospital situation with children's near-death experiences that crayons were in order, and I had them and paper. And he drew all kinds of animals. None of them were pets. But he got really frustrated with a bee, a bumblebee, because he couldn't get the head right. Drove him crazy. But he was with bees and squirrels and nature animals. It was really wonderful and not afraid of death. And he's all grown up now and has become something he's well integrated into his life. Mom is still alive. Everybody's still in place. Chuck Griswold. Okay. Chuck Griswold was a near-death experiencer who also almost drowned on the, I think it was the Skagit River here, whitewater rafting, made big news. 7 men drowned. Chuck survived. He was the only survivor of horrible flipped over in the rapids accident that, I mean, it was a local tragedy. But Chuck had had a near-death experience, and he wound up coming to Seattle IANDS. His wife would drive him, and she hated Seattle IANDS. She hated near-death experiences because where was her husband? Her husband was a scientist. In fact, he invented the hyperbolic chamber, divers use. He was full-bore scientist, not an atheist, agnostic, basically, but science-minded. So was she. Suddenly, her husband's back from a near-death experience, with peace, love, and acting like a hippie. She didn't like it. Chuck endured that. He and his wife just endured each other when it came to the subject of near-death experiences. But then the time came when Chuck was diagnosed with a terrible form of cancer, was given 6 weeks to live. The Griswolds live not far from the Sharps. I live in a place in Seattle called West Seattle, so did they. Again, my husband running the paramedic program at that time, and Chuck, 3 days after diagnosis, collapsed in Joyce's arms. Joyce called 911 and waited. They lived in a weird place that really didn't have a full address. So when the phone rang, she thought it was the medics going, "Where are you?" But it wasn't. It was her best friend, also named Joyce, in another town south of here called Burien. And she called and said, "Why did Chuck just walk across my living room?" And Betty, the hater of anything to do with near-death experiences, said, "Chuck's dead. He's dying. He's in my arms. He's not there." And her best friend, another grounded person and a BFF, said, "No, Chuck walked full Chuck, physically full Chuck, from the garage area in the kitchen, right between me and the TV and off to the bedrooms. And when I got up to look for him, I couldn't find him and called you." That raises another big question about the capacity when we die to, I don't know, traverse different dimensions or whatever. Needless to say, uh, Joyce changed completely after that. I mean, it was a 180, of course. She was fully on board, became a board member of our board. She too lives today, changed her life completely. Other things happened to her that were spiritual, transformative events that continued to change her to this day. I told that story because I swear Chuck's around here telling me to tell you. So that was something I was responding to. Now my other subjects are frightening near-death experiences. Oh yeah. Um, I had the no privilege of also with the invisibilities repeatedly coming across one nasty, I don't know, let me know a bit, one nasty invisibility, nothing but terror, terrified me. But I was rarely alone. I had housemates, terrified all of us. It was a thing that happened.
Hmm.
So there are ants at the picnic, so to speak.
Hmm.
Picnic being a wonderful life full of abundance. But then the ants come and they want to wreck it and they want to carry things off and they want to like bother us. Swat them aside. We have complete authority over all that negative energy, 100% authority. Just do it. I've become like, oh, I don't do it anymore, but I used to be like an exorcist, so to speak. And I could go into a situation that was haunted with scary things and did. But all I did was like say, get out. Unless you're paying rent here, you're not welcome. You have to go. And they did. I mean, it's just an authority we have. So if you're scared about something, let me know. But you can say, get out of here. There's spiritual boundaries as well as physical ones that are healthier to have in place. But when people have had frightening experiences, it's different in my experience. Now there is a woman, Nancy Evans Bush, who has stuck a flag in this. She is the go to. She had her own frightening experience. I knew her for many years before she spoke of it publicly because, if it's hard enough to talk about a radiant near death experience, oh, surrounded by love. What if you were in hell?
Hmm.
At what we would call hell, where all those things that terrify us do happen and come back from that going, what? And I'm there to help too. I understand that. And the good news is that of the people I've interviewed, which are cajillions who have had a frightening near death experience, no one stays there. Everyone gets out.
Hmm.
Everyone gets out through one means or another. Sometimes it needs to be processed before they see, oh, yeah, that's where I got out. Um, but people with frightening near death experiences um, aren't as forthcoming to others. It becomes a serious trust issue to share. And I, again, beg if you've had a scary experience to, there are plenty of people, even through IANDS, there's a group for distressing experiences. Distressing near death experiences, by the way, is a term that Nancy Evans Bush coined, and I like it.
We heard them described as hellish death experiences, even. Um,
Also, to say I had a negative experience is negatively charged. I mean, so yeah.
maybe,
Anyway,
maybe we can start asking some questions at this point.
sure.
Would you want to say some more
Um,
regarding
suicide. Oh wait, suicide.
suicide attempts?
We've had people suicide right out of Seattle Lions, by the way.
Hmm.
A near death experience does not protect one from suicidal ideation or behaviors.
Have, have you had anybody actually complete suicide from your group?
Oh, yeah.
You have. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Including near death experiencers. I
And
mean,
the,
yeah.
ex- the experiences, is it because of the experience that they can't integrate what happened that
Uh,
makes them?
Everyone has a different reason.
Okay.
And I do, again, I know a lot of people who've attempted suicide, some have died. Uh, and I don't have time to tell you one of the most spectacular after death communications from a suicide, a board member of Seattle Lions who committed suicide. Instead of having lunch with me, instead drove by and then jumped off a bridge. Knew he was suicidal, but a near-death experiencer. But it was just the winds of the world are too much for some people. And I do not believe suicide is a sin or an act of cowardice. It's as they say, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Not the best choice, but I have not spoken but to one person in a suicide attempt who went to a like hellish situation, but that didn't last because along came beautiful angels and presences that said, no, no, no. And it's a mental health situation. And on the other side, I have observed myself care given to people that depressed. It's just um, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who mentored me, by the way, name drop. Her belief was that people who successfully kill themselves remain in this school, and I'm not going to argue that, until the time of their natural death. And at that time, they're in school. Like we're learning better ways to, handle stress. So yeah, suicide happens. We don't want it to happen. It does.
I've heard different accounts from different people, including channelers, saying that suicide is a big no-no because it's basically leaving the game early and reneging on your contract, your soul contract that you agreed upon before you came into this incarnation. And because we have free will, what's happening is you're sort of spoiling everybody else's. It's a very laden kind of charged word, but you're sort of interfering with everybody else's free will to a certain extent because the suicide has such an impact on everybody in the family, and it ripples out. I've also heard that people who do commit, complete suicide have to sort of wait it out. If they're not punished, there's no punishment on the other side, but they kind of go into this place where there is a lot of learning, there's a lot of healing, because often there's a great deal of depression.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to kind of wait it out until everybody who because of their death they impacted, they have to sort of wait it out until everybody kind of lives out their life. And
I don't know. The school part I'm
yeah,
familiar with. I don't know about the other. So I have to tell you one more story,
yes, please,
and then we'll do Q&A.
absolutely.
So a woman from a town north of Seattle, married to a police officer in that town. It was New Year's Eve. Picture it, New Year's Eve. Marriage wasn't going well, but she loved her husband. She wanted to be married to the guy. So she did like, the candlelight dinner and the champagne and got all dolled up. So when he came off duty, it'd be New Year's Eve and they would, celebrate their love in a new year. Well, he came back and announced he was leaving her and did not love her. Oh, for good measure, leaving her for a man and in a small conservative town. That was going to be a scandal. Um, and he put it all on her. It's because of you. It's because of you. He just dumped all the blame on her. And because she was an emotionally abused woman, she went, you're right. It's all my fault. So he packs up and leaves. She's got I think it was white wine, not champagne, white wine. And she's got a bottle of pills of some kind. I want to say acetaminophen, but that would be kind of a joke right now. But anyway, it was something like that. She swallowed all the pills. She drank in her bed, the wine, and was going to commit suicide. And for good measure, she found his gun and shot herself in the chest. That's a suicide attempt. That does it. There's no like, oh, accidental overdose. She wanted to die because it was her fault that everything was happening that was going wrong in her life. She found herself, though, in the position of being on her bed, but sinking, 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 and thinking and sinking, fully cognitive, and sinking, going, oh my gosh, what have I done? Sinking and sinking like forever. And then finally, she was righted on her feet in a place that was all gray, monochromatic gray, like inside of a slot canyon, all gray, ground, all gray. The big gate in front of her to hell, dark gray. She went, oh, that's where I go. So she did the unthinkable to me. She goes over to the gate. Well, it's locked. She knows that's how you go to hell, and she deserves to go to hell because she's now wrecked her marriage, turned her husband gay, and committed suicide. So she tried to get in, but she couldn't get the gate open. I can't imagine what she was thinking. Let me in, let me in. She couldn't get in, and a voice behind her, full of love, said, "You don't have to do that. I already died for you." And she turned around and beheld what she called Jesus. Now, she did not mean that religiously. It was like, "Oh, hi." And she was lifted up. She survived. She survived the gunshot wound to the chest. Interestingly, they found no alcohol in her system. She swears she drank the whole bottle before she shot herself. She had to be that drunk to even do that. Uh, she lived and would not want to go through that experience again, but doesn't need to because she learned that she was loved. That was not her fault. She wasn't supposed to go to hell. She was loved, as we all are. Every one of us is loved the same, which is hard for my ego to take, frankly, because I want to be loved more than anyone else, but we're not. Thank you for letting me share all those stories and my own.
No, it's been fascinating.
Thank you.
I do want to encourage everybody who wants to ask a question, those who are joining us online, if you want to do it through the chat, you can. If not, raise your hand and we'll get to you. Those of you here, if you'd like to ask a question, you can always write it down or you can come up to the mic. So in the meantime, I do have some questions for you, Kim, and I just loved the flashes of light. You talked about 3 of them when you actually were really not wanting to come back. And it's almost as though the other side was doing everything they could to get you to come back. And those flashes of light, I mean, you talked about the first one being this house that you're going to live in, the mountains, where mountains meet
water. Yeah.
And then you went on this journey, you went west and you were trying to find where that was, and you went to different cities and it never worked out. So that's really pretty extraordinary. Once you got to Seattle, you just knew that that was the place. You make the, you draw the parallel of Dorothy on the journey with Toto, your pet. I mean, that's kind of fascinating. And you've been there ever since. And so there was a sense that you needed to go there, presumably, to do the work that you've been doing. And that was.
Yeah, I'm interrupting, but
No, please.
I'm interrupting. But yeah, in addition to how can we see without eyeballs, my other question is, what is time itself? How could I have been shown my future and then have stepped into it completely? I'm 77 years old now. I was in college at the time. I mean, it's been a while. So I can look back on my life and see it all fulfilled. But how does that work? Or when psychics say, "Oh, you're going to be married, you're going to be engaged by Christmas," and that did happen to me. And then I was engaged by Christmas, even though it was November and I wasn't dating anyone. How does that work? How I met my husband. I was single, lonely, in a dream, shouted out, "When am I going to meet Mr. Right?" Knock on the door, open it, in my dream. And there's a wizard on the other side and telling me I need to change the light bulb on my front porch. End of story. Almost a year later, I'm changing the light bulb on my front porch. A guy named Don Sharp walks up, hands me a wad of gum because I'm stuck. I've dropped the screw. I take the gum. I look down at my husband. I'm Kimberly Clark Sharp. How does that happen? It's amazing. What is time? I mean, there are a lot of people and a lot of theories to address that. But yeah, the future. And that's what I was shown, but it worked out.
Very fascinating, considering that we have free will and at every turn we could be making a different decision that would take you in a different path. But there it is, you're shown something that is perhaps meant to be. But I wonder if it's part of your life plan that you had signed up to do certain things. And
yeah, I guess. I mean, I thought I'd signed up to marry Robert Clark and live in Kansas. I mean, it worked. I went to school at K-State. My first night, I looked out on the campus and I thought, my husband's out here somewhere. I mean, that was my life plan. That it changed because I was on the wrong path, maybe. I don't know.
Or maybe it was your path, that was always your path, and maybe you veered off and this was a way of getting you back on your path. Who knows?
Yeah. A whomp upside of the head, which is what I call a near-death experience. And I'm talking to all of you near-death experiencers. It is a whomp upside the head, ain't it? It is just that. For everyone. And then when people say, "Oh, I wish I could have a near-death experience," it's like, no, because you gotta like die, and there are side effects to that that are physical, and life physically afterwards can be very fragile. A lot of NDErs, I think, die uh, younger than they might have otherwise, but no, it's pretty radical.
We have some other questions for you. How were you actually resuscitated, finally resuscitated?
Um, First came the Anderson portable ventilator, and that was probably going to be it, except that it was in extraction mode, which then set off cardiac events. That was chest compressions with the mask sealed to my mouth and nose area. Then, when the Good Samaritan came along, that was mouth to mouth with chest compressions. And then in the ER, I was breathing on my own, unconscious, but I was put, according to my dad, when my body was thrown in the back of the ambulance, I was breathing on my own. And there's a cheer. This was like a sidewalk theater in Kansas, it's like, but I have another thought, and I don't know what the questions are, but I haven't talked about angels, which is huge for me.
Please bring those in.
How's our time?
We're good. I'm monitoring it. We have about almost 20 minutes, just over 20 minutes left.
Okay. Here's what I love about invisibilities, what we call angels. For lack of a better word, these, again, it's ineffable, but I've been able to see dead people. I've addressed that. I've seen scary things. I've addressed that. I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but angels stop me in my tracks. And I'm talking like angels. I mean, how I perceive angels, I can't function and be in the presence of an angel that I can see. It's over. I just stop.
Okay. Oh,
They're angels. I mean, come on. So, uh, the angels that I have perceived, oh my gosh, I have a prop. They're huge. They're huge, huge beings. And I can see their form, but also through them. And here's my prop. How nice. I've had it right here. I'm drinking an angel. So you can see the glass and you can see what's inside. That's how I perceive angels. And this kind of movement, oh, this is great. I'm going to do this from now on. This works. Yay. It's all this activity. Are those wings? I'm not sure, but it's movement. And so big, see through, and angels who don't care one rip about me. I see an angel, I stop in my tracks. They don't even look at me. I am like unseen. I'm seeing them. They are not seeing me or don't care to. And I have seen angels on a piano at a piano concert at University of Washington Health Science Fair. I looked up the skirt of an angel. They're like angels on cocktail hour. They're like hanging out. It's like dudes, I've seen feminine, what I would call feminine energy angels, masculine energy angels, neutral angels. Um, so now I'm being prompted again. Here we go, crazy. But the story of Saul. Saul was a cardiologist admitted to the coronary care unit. His nephew was a resident on the coronary care unit. So it was, Uncle Saul. Uncle Saul was in really bad shape. And at one point, he defibrillated, which is heart stop. And the nephew was in there with the paddles, hit him with the paddles again, bump, nothing. Again, bump, nothing, over and over again. The room knew Saul was dead, but his nephew did not want to give up, and no one cared to step forward to stop him. So again, paddle. Then I'm distracted by something, and I look up and I was like, what? There, it's like my vision went through all this. Harborview is a huge building, but it's like I can see through everything in the building. And coming towards us were like a wedge of flying geese, except they were angels. They were like in a wedge. and they were coming down, and they were coming for Saul. And they came down and they got to his body. Try this at home. You won't be able to do it. He was lying flat with a lot of burn marks down from that. And he sat up from the way his ankles, calves, thighs, and hips remained flat on the bed. But he rose like this, which I don't have the core muscles to do that, and had this look of amazement and wonder in his eyes just when it was like swing low, sweet chariot. They came and got him and they took him. And that was the social worker, moi, who went up to the resident and said, he's gone. He's gone. And he believed me. There was no more efforts. I have many angel stories like that. I have so many. I can and do whole lectures on angels. Could I share one more story? If there's questions, I'm really blowing them off. Could I share one more story about angels?
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
have to completely let go of my professionalism at this point.
Angels are fascinating. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, because they're all around us. Hi, everybody. You got angels. You have angels around you. Anyway, I had mentioned that angels could care less about me. But one day after work, got into my car and was headed southbound on Interstate 5 to get to my house. And all I could see to the horizon were brake lights. It was like going to be a bad rush hour on Interstate 5 southbound. So we're all sitting there, and I'm in the far right lane out of 4 lanes. And then I'm hearing this like awfulness next to me. This is road rage. There was this guy who was in this 2-seater sports car screaming out his window, honk, honk, hey, you son of a, bad language. You bad language. Honk, honk. He was a nasty bit of anger. As if honking his horn and swearing at people were going to move his lane forward. Come on, sir. Well, anyway, so I look at him to give him the stink eye, if you know what I mean. Like, are you kidding me? But instead, there was an angel, as I've described, great big, see through, but you can see within, sitting there next to him. So here's the demo. This is where I get really unprofessional. Hi, everybody. Can you tell I'm a near-death experience who's very excited about her subject? So here I am driving, and I turn to look and at astonishment. I'm so glad that we are braking because I can't drive anymore. And so I'm like, as I'm looking at this angel, but the angel's perspective is like, I don't exist. Yeah, straightforward. The guy is still yelling. The angel is still looking forward. And I'm still going because it's an angel. And the only time an angel ever acknowledged me was at that moment. This angel slowly turned and looked right at me and went, what can I do? He's my guy. I can't control him. That free will thing, Angie, you were talking about is fully in place. And then he just went back and did his thing looking forward, and his lane left before mine. And I'm still, what just happened? But it was cute. So the angels that guide us and protect us and love us
Can I ask you a
can
quick?
also be annoyed by us.
That you're describing that as an angel. We hear about guides. This was definitely an angel and not this guy's guide. Is that correct?
Yeah. Here, may I get up for a moment and show you my guide? No, different. In my experience, different. I got this as a birthday present this summer from another best friend in Montana.
Mm.
This guy's been with me since childhood. I have now visited his grave with the same friend that got me this. We had a spiritual transformative experience trying to locate it. I mean, I could write a book, but this isn't in After the Light. His name is Chief Joseph of Nez Perce, but this is Daddy. There's a very famous, I Will Fight No More Forever, very eloquent son of his, also Chief Joseph. This is Chief Joseph the Senior. He's a tough nut. He has been hard on me at times because I will love to go astray. It's like, rah. And then she found in a museum, her name's Kathy, my other BFF, found this, and I have now someone to look at, but I've been looking at him for a jillion years. So, I mean, well, jillion, but probably 70 years, maybe. Don't know why, but it does explain my interest in certain native cultures. Big interest. I feel very at home in a powwow. Who knows? Also, in that dream I had, when am I needs to write? Another very important guide of mine was on the other side of the door. Looked like Gandalf in miniature. A small man, but like wizardy and gnarly looking, very, very old. And he's the one who said, you need to change the light bulb on your front porch. That was guidance. Another time I told my dad, I'm surrounded by 25 angels. And my father, getting used to me by then, said, how do you know there's 25? And I said, well, because 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm counting them. And he said, why do you think you have 25 angels around you? And I said, high maintenance.
So you're differentiating between guides and angels. So the role of angels then is the guardian angel that we all grow up, being told about to protect.
I have seen angels in various functions. Some just hanging around, some guiding. Oh my gosh, stories are now cramming into my brain that I won't have time to share. But yeah, protecting angels, and then why protect me and not that person? I mean, I'm not going to sort it out because I can't. I can't sort it out. I'm not that person.
Do they have wings? Do they have wings?
Back to this movement, there's movement. Can I see like bird wings? No, I have not. Not like, the bird wings. I have seen be-robed and movement. I don't know how to describe it, which could be wings. Um, the I-5 angel, was sitting. I didn't see any wings spread. The angels of cocktail hour, definitely no wings spread, but yet this movement behind them that is, but also what they exude. What they exude, the reason I believe we call them angels is that they exude this energy that we have come to call angels. And that is not just in the United States. I mean, there are accounts of angels in other religions, other parts of the world. We kind of all concur that there's a certain vibe with an angel and a certain appearance. I have so many angel stories, Angie. You're well named, kind of like an angel. But yeah, near-death experiencer who needed to get out of a coma, and met her on an airplane after 9/11 of all things. And she said she was out of her coma, but very ill. And she said that she didn't know how to get out of her coma. And she'd been in a coma for, I think, months following a stroke. But she saw an angel that she perceived as female with a kind of like a lantern, sort of filled with glowy, warm light, and behind her, pulling the souls of children about to be born. That's got my attention. So I think angels have as much function as we on earth do. I also do believe that some angels are here to trip us so that we do fall and we learn to get up, or to learn for proper help to get up. I think there's multifunctional invisibilities.
May
Just kidding.
I ask a question? Because I think this is an interesting and a good question to ask. How does your NDE influence the way you approach aging and the illnesses that lead to natural death?
Well, I like the natural death part. I'm going to say something that I believe in strongly, and that is I don't like violence. So I think we can probably, most of us agree. I myself do not wish to die by violence of any kind, or fire. I've got my list, but I'm not afraid of death. However, I do have concerns about dying, the verb of. And that is as much a fear, in my experience, that humans have as what's going to happen after I die. We all want to be cognitive and in our own beds at an advanced age, surrounded by loved ones. I mean, that's the goal. Doesn't always happen. Tragedy happens, but is it tragedy? I don't know. I'm not here to judge, but how my near-death experience affects my own aging is that it has it's given me a spark of life. My own doctor 2 years ago said, Kim, I think you're going to live another 20 years, which would make me 95. I went, huh, really? She said, yeah, you have the strongest life force. I'd never heard that from a doctor, but I would say my near death experience put that in place. Um, and then, but I do have a fear of dying because I don't want to suffer. Go figure. And also, I have FOMO, fear of missing out. I want to live forever because I want to know who really killed JFK. What are in the files? I have a lot of questions that I don't want to miss out on. And I have an endless curiosity. I love to travel I've just made that a part of my life. Um, and I want to do more of that, even though my daughter is saying, Mom, no more. You're too old. You can't do that. As I go stumbling off again to some of the crazy trip that my husband is paying for and praying about himself. I'm adventuresome. I'm basically fearless because of my near-death experience. And that does apply to death. That is off the table fear. Just the getting there and then the missing out of everything. So I would say my near-death experience 100% informs me about aging and my impending natural death. But it's hard to grieve. My suffering doesn't bother me. It's the suffering of loved ones. My parents have died now. I heard from both of them, by the way. That's good. But, the pain is in grieving, not in dying, and in my NDE perception.
The boy that you mentioned, whose mother died, and you were behind the curtain, and you were encouraging him to ask his mother to speak to his mother that she would hear everything. What happened to that boy? What happened to him? Do you have any idea?
In the long run, I don't know. In the short run, he said his piece. I made sure he fully had it out because Mom was still there. And then I gave myself permission to leave my job. I had a boss. I had to check out and say, I'm leaving. I put him in my car and we drove to a place where he did have extended relatives and friends in another part of Seattle. I took him. I wasn't just, he was alone. I wasn't going to go, okay, then bye. No. I've done other things like that too, like getting Blackie the three-legged dog. Yeah, I would go off script plenty in my job to take care of people. And so for him, I delivered him unto loving, horrified arms, but no follow-up. He wasn't my patient, and I don't know.
Have you been, obviously your near-death experience has led to some very psychic abilities. Have you been validated in psychic circles? Is one of our questions here.
I don't know.
Also, are able
I say I'm not psychic, and then, like 10 people would jump on me at a Seattle IANDS meeting and go, yeah, you are. I think it's just the word psychic.
in
Meditation, but
yeah.
Yeah, in spades. Oh my gosh, like in spades within the week, within the last 6 days. By the way, we used to call these woo-woos, and guess what? I came up with that term. It came out of here in Seattle IANDS. We had no means to describe spiritual transformative experiences, so I call them woo-woos because woo-woo is the last sound you're going to hear on your railroad tracks as that spiritual train comes down those tracks and knocks you off those tracks forever and ever. And so we began to call it woo-woos. Now it has a little bit of, snide tone, which wasn't intended, but that was the basis of the term woo-woos. It was Seattle IANDS and us trying to find words for things that were not near-death experiences.
You kept your near-death experience quiet for a very long time, even though you were working with people and helping them as a result of those abilities, but you never actually divulged. Did you finally, in the work environment, ever tell anyone?
Oh yeah, it was hard to avoid eventually. And I'm trying to remember, there was a key thing that happened when I got confronted, as I recall, and I had to own it. So friends knew, my family knew. I mean, my people knew, but that's not the public. And but I finally had to fess up for one reason. I knew other people that weren't fessing up that had, like Nancy Evans Bush not sharing she had a frightening experience. Yet she was the expert in the field, and I knew why. She's since come out with all that. But yeah, it's back in the day, there were people who came to State Alliance out of institutions because it was a mental health issue. Back in the day, there were people that came to our group out of their churches because they'd been told from the pulpit they were going to hell. Because if you don't see the face of Jesus first, you're in hell. A little boy, by the way, uh, Colton Burpo, his dad wrote a book. Yeah. I have been with the family, been with him in person to talk to him. He was 11 by then.
Whereas
And,
for
and what?
the Heaven is for Real movie.
Yeah, yeah. And it was a book before then. Heaven is for real. Cute kid. Anyway, his father was a conservative pastor. The child who had the experience, the first thing that he saw was his father's grandfather, so his paternal great grandfather, who was long since deceased. So this was sort of a quandary for dad because dad had been preaching, if when you die, you don't see the face of Jesus, you're in hell. And his own beloved son saw his own beloved grandfather, not the face of Jesus. So that took some working out. And there's a big PS with that family too. Half the congregation pulled out. It was in Nebraska. People, religions, religions can be so divisive. That's not what the intention is. The intention is to love. That's all there is to it. And I would love to even finish up with one truest statement ever. And that is that God loves you so much. One can never fully understand that love, but God loves you so much. It's insane and terrific. And we're so literally blessed by it. Even in life's challenges, we are loved beyond what we are humanly capable of doing. We cannot love each other as much as we are loved by the Creator or our guides or the angels. I mean, the whole mess of invisibilities is on us with love. And I love you with that.
Me too, very much. So it sounds as though the near-death experience was one of the best, maybe the best thing that ever happened to you, even though it's been a journey.
Oh, yeah, having a baby worked. And I just became a grandmother for the first time. So that's, so I don't know, I have levels of heaven and that influence me. But I'm basically, joyful and funny and
Yes.
grounded. I married a grounded man, which is, good for me. I call us Ben Franklin and the kite. So my husband, the firefighter, paramedic, blah, 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 is Ben Franklin. I'm the kite at the end of the string. So he grounds me, but I bring in the juice, the electricity. I'm the interesting one. And together, we've worked it out in almost 40 years of marriage now.
That's very fantastic.
So my life has been very stable on earth level and very woo, woo at another level.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. It's been fascinating. I didn't realize that you had played such a key and seminal role in the story of the shoe on the roof of the hospital. That is what really got my attention many, many years ago, as far as taking the near-death experience very seriously, because I'm very skeptical. I've been trained as a scientist, and that made me really think about how this is not a hallucination. It's not apoxia of the brain, which is what was, used against the near-death experience to refute it. So I didn't realize that you had played such a key role in disseminating that story and really getting people's attention. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your story this afternoon. And you're amazing. And your book is called Afterlife, is that correct?
Oh yeah, I asked you to remind me of that. Oh, an ad, because I never do this. I'm horrible at promoting. So yeah, this is a hardback, After the Light, now in the Library of Congress. I mean, it was actually published at a big book tour in New York City, William Morrow. Then paperback came out, and that was another book tour, and this was like another publishing house. And then this is the current copy, which was the trade paperback from Penguin. Penguin was purchased by on-demand print. I've never paid a dime to have this printed. Again, I'm lifted into everything. I get paid. I still get royalties. I like to think it's a good book. The Library of Congress thought it was a good book. And I wrote that sucker. It took me a year and a half, and it took a village, I have to say.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so
much. It's all in there, by the way. All these stories and more are in there. And I write like I talk.
Well, thank you. And we are out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure. God bless, and congratulations on your new grandchild. And keep up the great work with your IANDS work and everything, all the light that you are bringing into the world. Thank you again, and thanks everybody.
Thank you all in attendance and listening to me.
Really appreciate.
God bless us one and all, as Tiny Tim said, and thank you.
Thank you. Take care now. Bye bye. Bye everybody. See you next time. Bye bye.